This is the most ridiculously overpowered male lead I've seen in January, all because he has one terrifying skill: whoever he wants dead, dies. And that is not even the craziest part. The moment anyone directs killing intent toward him, no matter how far away they are, he can wipe them out from thousands of miles away. In other words, without his enemies even realizing it, he can eliminate anyone who poses a threat to him, which instantly turns every hero and villain into a deadly problem. He is basically Homelander dropped into another world. And to understand how he became this insane, we have to go back to his school spring trip. After their bus passed through a tunnel, the male lead's entire class was suddenly transported to another world. Before anyone could even process what had happened, a strangely dressed woman suddenly appeared inside the bus. The woman introduced herself as the sage Ziwan, and to take control of the situation, she immediately removed the teacher and the driver. She warned the students not to move and told them to focus all their attention on her. As it turned out, she was the one who had summoned the bus. Her goal was simple: to search other worlds for talented candidates worthy of becoming sages. This world was ruled by sages, but every so often their numbers needed to be replenished. After saying that, she cast a spell on everyone present. It was a magical system called Battle Master, and anyone whose body lit up had successfully awakened. Each person would receive a different class and skill, but there were exceptions like the female lead who did not glow or awaken at all. Apparently, some people were completely incompatible with the system. Still, failing to awaken right away was not the end, as long as they awakened within 1 month. If they awakened and became a sage within that time, they would be considered to have cleared the trial. But if they failed, they would be reduced to livestock used for extracting magical energy. Their first task would be assigned 1 hour later, and with that, the woman vanished. Only the stunned students were left behind, and the very first mission they received was a nightmare. This place would be attacked by a giant dragon in 1 hour. While everyone was panicking, their classmate Shiki, who had awakened as a general, gathered everyone and proposed that they work together. He demanded that each student reveal the abilities they had awakened. Of course, anyone without abilities did not need to join the meeting. And the female lead was not the only one who had failed to glow. Ling Shang and Tong Sheng in the back had not awakened either. Along with them was the male lead, who was still sleeping soundly even now. Those without awakened skills were not only refused a team, they were also stopped by Shichi in order to serve as bait to lure the dragon away. Tong Sheng wanted to resist, but the other side had already awakened a skill, and even at level 1, that power was enough to crush ordinary people. And just like that, after a short-haired girl cast charm magic on them, the 4 of them were locked inside the bus and left to die. The female lead never imagined the classmates and friends she had known for years could become this heartless. Just as everyone fell into complete panic, a giant dragon appeared in the sky. When Tong Sheng tried to climb out through the window and escape, the dragon casually launched an attack. The strike hit Ling Shang in the middle of the bus, and moments later, Tong Sheng also died without even understanding what had happened. It was at that moment that the terrified female lead finally woke the sleeping male lead, who still thought they had simply arrived at their destination. Only after seeing the horrific scene before him did he groggily snap back to his senses. And at that exact moment, outside the window, the dragon was still trying to crush the bus flat. Seeing this, the male lead casually picked up a microphone. He hurled it straight at the dragon, but strangely, it was as if some invisible force blocked the beast. The dragon was instantly blasted backward, and when the male lead calmly said the words telling it to die, the very next second, the dragon collapsed to the ground and stopped moving completely. The female lead was left frozen by what she had just witnessed. Yet the male lead acted like nothing had happened. He even pulled out his game console and started playing at his own pace, as if he had only swatted a fly. Since the male lead had been asleep the entire time, he had no idea what had happened before. Only after the female lead explained everything from beginning to end did he decide the outside should be safe now. But she still wanted to know whether he had done something just now, because there was no way the dragon had suddenly dropped dead for no reason. As for that question, the male lead casually brushed it off, saying something like, "The dragon must have died from the fall." Then they finally left the bus. At the moment, there were 3 routes ahead of them: a hill, a town, and a forest. While they were deciding which way to go, the female lead noticed something flying toward them from far away. At first, she thought it was another dragon, but when it got closer, she realized it was their classmates, Dong Tian Fuyuan and Hanakawa. The male lead originally planned to kill them on sight, but the female lead wanted to try negotiating first. If they could cooperate, having more allies would not hurt. However, judging from their attitude when they arrived, they clearly had no intention of making friends. Too bad for them, the male lead could make anyone die the moment he wanted them dead. Not only that, he could also sense their killing intent. As he spoke, he casually took out the servant standing beside them too, leaving only the chubby one alive. At this point, the chubby guy refused to believe that two S-class ability users had actually died just because of a single sentence. But after exhausting every healing spell he had, he was finally forced to accept reality. By now, all his earlier arrogance had completely disappeared. Desperate to survive, he took out a collar, an extremely rare magical item. Whoever wore it would recognize the first person they saw as their master. And just like that, the male lead somehow ended up with a pet. But he clearly did not like this creature very much, so he ordered him to go stand by in the distant forest. Before sending him away, he even took every last piece of treasure the chubby guy had. Meanwhile, somewhere else in this world, the sage Ziwan received a report from her subordinates. Regarding the candidates, they had not only found a dead giant dragon at the scene, but also 4 corpses. To Ziwan, that result itself did not seem especially strange. The real problem was that among the 4 dead, 2 were actually S-class ability users. And from the looks of it, they had died suddenly, without any warning at all. And the truth was just 2.5 minutes earlier. The moment the 2 who had arrived in this other world stepped into town, they were targeted by a beastman cat girl who instantly recognized the male lead as a sage candidate. She even offered to guide him around for free. Although the cat girl looked bright and charming on the surface, she was actually running a classic honey trap behind the scenes. After the male lead and the female lead finished walking around, the cat girl finally showed her true colors. In an instant, the male and female leads were surrounded by beastmen on both sides. The male lead had seen through the trap long ago, but the female lead could not resist the temptation. After asking what she wanted, they learned the truth. The cat girl had already seen through them and realized neither of them had received a blessing. And people without cheats were exactly the kind of prey they targeted first. Seeing the beastmen about to make their move, the male lead stopped hiding his power, while one of them tried throwing out threats and excuses. But at this point, he could not care less. Instead, he calmly continued using these beastmen as test subjects. What he really wanted to know was whether his ability could be controlled without killing the target outright. Looks like the description had to be more specific, so he tried saying their eyeballs should go blind. And to everyone's shock, the target really became blind. That scene scared both sides senseless. Realizing things had gone terribly wrong, the cat girl hurriedly begged the male lead for mercy. She claimed she still had a younger brother at home, waiting for her to return with food, but that was no excuse for trafficking people. So the male lead granted them death in 10 years. The beastmen instantly panicked, begging and screaming, but no matter how much they pleaded, there was no taking it back. It turned out the male lead had secretly changed the timing of their deaths. They would not die immediately, but it was only a matter of time. Then, just as the 2 of them were about to leave, nearby patrol guards suddenly stopped them. They demanded that the male lead explain what had just happened. He wanted to bluff his way through, but it was obvious they had been watching the whole time. Seriously, if they saw everything that early, why did they not help? But the captain simply said they were investigating the organization behind the thieves, so they could not act recklessly. After saying that, he moved to arrest the 2 of them, but George suddenly interrupted. As it turned out, George's appraisal skill had detected no blessing on either of them, so these strange events could not have been caused by them. After hearing his assistant's explanation, the captain finally let the matter go, to apologize to the male lead. George introduced the male and female leads to a place to stay, and soon the 2 arrived at the most luxurious hotel, where each of them booked a separate room. The female lead then realized this was probably the first time she had been separated from the male lead since coming to this other world. While she was lost in her thoughts, a ghost suddenly appeared right in front of her. It was frightening at first, but after taking a closer look, she felt the figure was strangely familiar. As it turned out, this person was the guardian spirit that had protected the female lead's bloodline for generations. The reason the spirit had never shown up before was mainly because of the male lead, since that guy could instantly kill people over the smallest thing. To avoid being caught in the crossfire, the spirit begged her to tell him about its existence ahead of time, tomorrow. And since the ghost was the female lead's ancestor, it naturally had some real skills. Its power could help her defend against spiritual attacks. In fact, the reason the system installation failed earlier was because the spirit had blocked it for her. The moment she heard she had no cheat because of this ancestor's interference, she was furious. But the ghost explained that although the system could make people stronger, it came with even more negative effects. For example, their lives would be completely controlled by the sages. Besides, their family had its own true inheritance, so there was no need to worry about being too weak. However, before they could even settle in properly, something else happened. A sudden attack shattered their moment of peace, and not far away, a sage was locked in battle with a massive mecha. The 2 sides traded blows evenly for a while. Seeing this, the female lead wanted the male lead to step in and finish them off. After all, they had almost been killed just now, but the male lead refused since that earlier attack had only been an accident. But he would not think that way for long, because the sage and the mecha had already brought their fight right in front of them. Even worse, the other side had no regard for ordinary people's lives. and casually unleashed a huge attack straight at the crowd. A blazing fire dragon spell roared out, tearing through the street like it was meant to burn everything in sight. Meanwhile, after the mecha witnessed the male lead's power, it immediately offered to surrender. Seeing how advanced the mecha's technology looked, the male lead asked whether it had any way to return to Earth, but the mecha explained that it could only return to its own world and had no way to cross over to Earth. So the male lead asked again whether it could take them to its world instead. But the mecha refused without hesitation because the male lead's ability was far too dangerous. Fortunately, before leaving, it told the male lead that this world was located on the lowest layer, and if he wanted to go home, he would have to climb upward. Only by reaching higher layers could he search for Earth's coordinates. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the sage, Ziwan, was discussing the death of the sage Santaru with a vampire progenitor. Lingling suspected the enemy might possess an instant death ability, but Santaru clearly had resistance against instant death, so she decided to send someone to test the situation first. And the one chosen for that job was Masayuki, a terrifying controller with an ability made for domination. This was the most absurdly powerful controller I had ever seen. Not only could he command 5 slaves at once for his own use, he could even control countless cockroaches to harass his enemies. But now even a broken skill like that had run into a true nightmare, the male lead with his instant kill cheat. As it turned out, just moments ago, after the two of them finally reached the city and were about to find a hotel, they ran into another classmate. When the classmate realized it was Denora, he came over to greet her. But the female lead was surprised to see him here because at this point, the other students should have been training in the primitive forest. The classmate claimed his strength had already reached the peak, so there was no need to follow those inefficient people around. Then he proudly introduced his slave guard squad, which included a tsundere twin-tailed girl, a mature beauty, and even a little girl. In short, he had every type covered. But when these girls introduced themselves, they all shared one thing in common. They were unusually hostile toward the female lead. As it turned out, this classmate had been trying to invite Denora to become his lover. Faced with such a sudden confession, the female lead was completely speechless, and she rejected him without even thinking. Clearly, he was only after her body, so she asked where he got all that confidence from. Since she seemed so curious about him, he stopped holding back and explained everything. It all began on the day they were transported when classmate Feng came looking for him. Feng had come to give classmate Ju a little advice because his class was Dominator. Because of that, everyone would naturally keep their distance from him, but this was no time for internal fighting. If no one in the class became a sage, then all of them would be turned into livestock. So the first thing classmate Ju needed to do was buy as many slaves as possible. As it turned out, whenever a Dominator fought and won, the target they defeated would automatically become their slave. At the same time, the experience points those slaves gained would also be shared with the Dominator. But the strange thing was, even Ju himself did not know this ability worked that way. So how did Feng, an outsider, know so much about it? Following that advice, Ju gradually built up the terrifying power he had now. And with that confidence, classmate Ju once again invited the female lead to become his lover. But Denora rejected him again without hesitation. Seeing that she still would not accept Ju, could only leave the hotel in disappointment. After that, the male and female leads stayed in the hotel to rest and recover. But right at that moment, Moko suddenly sends someone approaching with clear hostility, even though she could not see the person at all. Faced with that situation, the female lead did not hesitate for a second and immediately called the male lead in the next room. After hearing what happened, the male lead stepped into the hallway to check, and sure enough, he detected killing intent. Without wasting a word, he instantly killed the attacker. But when they looked closer, they realized it was one of classmate Ju's slaves. To prevent Ju from coming after them, the male and female leads immediately decided to pack their things and leave. Meanwhile, Ju also sensed Erika's death. To figure out how she died, he checked her memories from before her death. But all he saw was her suddenly collapsing, with nothing else to explain it. What bothered him even more, however, was why Erika had appeared in the hallway in the first place. The white-haired girl explained that she had probably tried to bring that woman to him in order to please her master, or perhaps she believed Denora was unworthy of him and planned to eliminate her. Even so, Ju found it strange. Were servants not supposed to be unable to do anything that went against their master's interests? But some servants, believing their actions benefit their master, may act on their own without fully following their master's true wishes. And now Erika's unnecessary move would most likely cause Denora to run away. So in order to capture the female lead, Ju sent Lisa and Chelsea to stop them. The moment they met, the enemies froze the male and female leads without saying a word. But a cheap trick like that could never hold the male lead. Lisa was instantly stunned because the male lead's power was not limited to living beings. Even objects could be erased if he targeted them, such as making the opponent's staff die. And just like that, the staff really snapped cleanly in two. As you can see, as long as the male lead wants it, he can kill anything. Just as the male lead was about to approach and ask them for information at some unknown moment, a doll suddenly appeared from the ceiling behind him. Luckily, the female lead caught it in time and threw it away, but Lisa immediately tried to launch another attack. Fortunately, the male lead reacted fast enough and instantly killed her. And when a swarm of dolls came flying toward them, all it took was a single thought from him. He wiped them all out at once, then immediately traced the enemy back to their hiding place. Meanwhile, on Yuki Ju's side, he once again sensed the deaths of his slaves. Lisa was dead, and Chelsea had lost all fighting ability after spilling every piece of information, but at the same time, Ju finally learned about the male lead's instant kill power. It was hard to believe, but after seeing his slaves suddenly die one after another, he had no choice but to accept that such an ability existed. So while observing them, Yuki Ju decided to lure the male and female leads into a place where they would be easier to attack. To test them, he controlled every cockroach in the city and sent them swarming in. But in doing so, he exposed his own killing intent, and that single mistake let the male lead lock onto him and send Yuki Ju away right in front of his two remaining slaves. With the Dominator dead, both of them were released from his control. Now that their master was gone, the white-haired girl decided to part ways with the other one. But when she left the underground area and returned to the surface, she found herself surrounded by desert. A mass of black monsters was advancing toward the city, and at the same time, a new crisis had already erupted inside the city. Chaos spread through the streets as another enemy appeared, turning the situation even more dangerous than before. And once again, this proved why the male lead was the most ridiculously overpowered character I had ever seen. His ability could instantly kill any living being, and in this world, that did not only mean creatures of flesh and blood. Even lifeless undead counted. As it turned out, the male lead's instant kill cheat was not limited to ordinary life forms. If he believed something could move, then to him, it was alive. Even if everyone else thought those people were already dead, he saw them moving. And as long as they posed a threat to him, they would all be instantly killed. But the enemy still refused to believe it. How could someone without even a proper level have this kind of power? He must have used some hidden trick. Thinking that the enemy decided to personally step forward and test him, but that only ended in another instant kill. Now the only one left was the man standing nearby, and luckily he knew how to read the room. He surrendered immediately. As it turned out, this man was the mayor of the city, and he never wanted the city to become like this. The problem was that the man from earlier was a subordinate of the sage Lane, the commander of the undead army. So once Lane gave the order, the mayor did not dare disobey. After hearing this, the female lead found it strange. Lingling was a sage Ziwan had summoned them here to become sages. Yet now, another sage named Lane had appeared and was trying to kill them. But the mayor did not understand the reason either. Generally speaking, no one was supposed to interfere with sage candidates. But just as they reached that point in the conversation, Mokomoko suddenly noticed that some kind of spiritual force was approaching the city, and at the same time, the male lead sensed killing intent. At that moment, every citizen in the city began moving toward them. Even though the undead commander had already been killed, the citizens were still being controlled, and the situation was getting worse by the second. The mayor suddenly remembered that the city's barrier might be able to break mental magic, so he quickly took out the city key and tried to activate it. But to his shock, nothing happened. Could this be a loophole set up by Lord Lane himself? Meanwhile, Lane was controlling everything from thousands of miles away, testing just how far the male lead's instant kill ability could reach. Since the male lead could activate his skill by sensing killing intent, what would happen if Lane created countless unconscious dolls with no killing intent and launched a surprise attack? On top of that, he now had the invader called Darkness backing him up, which meant everything that happened next could simply be written off as a natural disaster. At that moment, Darkness had already entered the city. Everything in its path was wiped clean, so the male lead immediately used his instant kill skill and eliminated it. But what he did not know was that Lane had been using Darkness's killing intent as cover for his real attack. And these attacks were not aimed at any specific target. In other words, Lane was trying to use indiscriminate bombardment to create an accident that would kill the male lead. The male lead wanted to know who was attacking, but he could not even see the attacks clearly. However, the female lead, who had a guardian spirit, managed to see what was flying through the sky. As unbelievable as it sounded, there really were countless women in red dresses falling from above. The moment the mayor heard they were dressed in red, he immediately realized it was Lord Lane. So this was Lane's true attack. The enemy had clearly come prepared, but that did not mean they were completely out of options. If they could make one of Lane's clones attack directly in front of the male lead, then things would become much simpler. And just as he said that, the mayor suddenly came up with a plan. He took out a map and revealed that he had been observing Lane's attacks from the beginning. After several rounds of bombardment, he noticed that the attacks followed a fixed pattern. They never struck the same location twice, and they never attacked entrances and exits consecutively. Looking at it now, Even an indiscriminate attack had accidentally created a pattern, meaning they could roughly predict where the next attack would land. After finalizing the plan, the three of them teleported to an open area. Sure enough, not long after they arrived, an attack appeared above them. Luckily, Moko Moko activated the barrier she had obtained earlier from the Gundam-like mecha, barely blocking the strike. On the other side, Lane was not nearly as lucky. He could not believe what had just happened. He had clearly been cautious enough, even hiding his main body in another dimension. Yet even then, he still could not escape the male lead's ability. And just like that, even Lane's hidden body was dragged into death. Meanwhile, inside a certain room, a young girl awakened from a coffin, and moments later, a recording left by Lane appeared before her. If you are seeing this video, then it means my plan has succeeded. At the same time, back at the temporary camp, Ryoko suddenly noticed that someone had broken into her tent. She was about to arrest the intruder, only to discover that the person inside was actually Carol. As it turned out, Carol had come to return her phone. To be more accurate, she had stolen it first, and only brought it back because the battery was almost dead. After asking her purpose, Ryoko learned that Carol had also been trying to monitor the male lead, and she even revealed her identity as an American ninja. Since they could not return to their original world anyway, there was no longer any need to keep it secret. The two of them had also been sent by the higher-ups to monitor the male lead. Carol may have used satellite surveillance on him before, but in this world, something like that was probably useless now. This was the most budget-saving, overpowered protagonist I had ever seen. Even when attacked by a level 10,000 giant dragon, he did not move at all. He simply told it to die, and in the very next second, the dragon really dropped dead. But that was far from his limit. Even if 1,000 dragons like that surrounded him at once, it would still only take him a single sentence to wipe them all out. But after seeing him in person, she finally realized that the research subject the doctor had called a monster was actually just a little kid. That instantly left her stunned. How could such an adorable child be treated like a test subject? She could not understand what that doctor was even trying to do, and the same went for him too. How could he be so obedient and just let himself be locked up here? After saying that, she picked up the male lead and rushed outside. Then she dumped him straight into a puddle. After that, he said he was hungry and asked whether she could make him something to eat. But something as simple as cooking immediately put Asaka in a difficult spot. It was not that she had no ingredients. She simply had no idea how to cook. Still, she had to prepare something before he finished washing up, so she decided to fool him with instant noodles first. But what she never expected was that the cheap instant noodles found everywhere in her world would make him eat with such pure satisfaction. Thinking about that, Asaka asked the male lead what his name was, only to learn that he did not have one at all. And having no name clearly would not do. So Asaka decided to give the male lead a name. After looking him over again and again, she realized he looked strangely like the dog she used to raise. So she named him Yogiri, the same name as her old puppy. And with that name, the male lead lived all the way into this other world. At this moment, they were traveling toward the royal capital, but a massive boulder appeared ahead of them, blocking the road. And just then, a giant dragon suddenly appeared behind them. The male lead instantly killed it without a word. And right after that, a whole swarm of dragons appeared beyond the mountain. Once again, the male lead wiped out the entire dragon swarm without saying much. But before even 2.5 minutes of peace could pass, another dragon appeared before them. This dragon, however, was a little special. It was actually a rare, shining dragon. Unfortunately, this dragon did not direct any killing intent at the male lead. Instead, it simply said he had passed, then flew away into the distance. But the male lead had no intention of letting it leave. If it could talk, then that changed everything. And just like that, the female lead was completely stunned. How had the golden dragon from just now suddenly turned into a little girl? As it turned out, her name was Attila. The earlier attack had been a test to see whether the male lead was qualified to meet the Sword Saint. But the male lead had no idea what this so-called Sword Saint was. Apparently, the Sword Saint was in existence powerful enough to rival a sage, and could even grant blessings to people. After hearing that this might lead to information about the sages, the male lead decided to follow her and meet the so-called Sword Saint. But when they arrived, the place was packed with people, all of them aiming to become the next Sword Saint. And today happened to be the selection day for the Holy King's Knights. Once enough people had gathered, the Sword Saint Boo finally appeared and began his trial. The first trial was a life or death free-for-all. If the number of participants was not reduced to less than half within 10 minutes, then everyone would be disqualified. And if anyone tried to leave, all of them would lose their qualification as well. The moment those words fell, hundreds of people launched into a chaotic battle that lasted 10 full minutes. The scene instantly became a complete mess. The male lead could already feel they had been dragged into trouble, and just as he was about to instantly kill the people charging at them, a blonde guy suddenly appeared and interrupted his cast. He kept saying things like, They did not understand the Sword Saint's true intentions at all. Hearing that the female lead thought there was finally at least one normal person here. But right at that moment, the male lead suddenly detected killing intent coming from the bushes in the distance. Someone had been hiding there all along, waiting for the perfect chance to strike. After that, the Sword Saint stopped the battle and ordered the remaining survivors to follow him. Besides the male and female leads, the only ones left were the blonde guy Rick and the purple-haired Rainier. And the place they were heading next was where the Holy King had sealed the demon god. But what surprised the female lead was that this world was actually this advanced. It even had elevators. Following the Sword Saint, they arrived at the central area of this strange underworld. This was the most unfairly overpowered protagonist I had ever seen. While everyone else fought desperately at the front, just when victory was finally within reach, he stood in the back thinking it was a waste of time and ended the entire battle with only 2 words. Absolutely insane. As it turned out, not long after they reached the second stage of the Sword Saint's trial, trouble found them again. A woman blocked their path, and she was none other than Teresa, a former Holy King's knight. The reason she was called former was because she had slaughtered too many innocent people and had her qualifications stripped away by the Sword Saint. That was why she had returned to take the trial a second time, believing that if she had earned the title once, she could earn it again. She took the initiative to target the male lead's group, but unfortunately for her, she had run into the worst possible opponent. The male lead casually said 2 words, "Die," and in the very next second, she really died. Rick was completely stunned by what he saw. After all, she had once been a powerful Holy King's knight, yet she was erased just like that. Afterward, they quickly arrived at the 98th floor of the trial tower. Unlike the other floors, this one was specially prepared as a rest area for challengers. After that, to prevent another round of killing each other like before, they decided to split up. Meanwhile, somewhere in the forest, a blue short-haired woman, dressed in a neat, refreshing outfit, was hunting down sage candidates. After her final attempt to persuade one of them failed, she killed the person without hesitation. This woman was the sage Aoi Hayanose. Her job was to eliminate reincarnators who refused to become sages. Just as the woman was about to leave, a voice suddenly called out to her. A chubby guy was kneeling in front of Aoi Hayanose, and it turned out to be the same chubby guy from the first episode. He explained that Ki Teng had taken him in back in the forest, but now that Ki Teng was dead, he had nowhere left to go, so the chubby guy begged her to take him along. Left with no better choice, Aoi Hayanose reluctantly brought the chubby guy with her. The two of them arrived at Flying Dragon Mountain, the same place where the male and female leads had gotten lost before. By now, the flying dragons here had been wiped out by the male lead, leaving only the golden dragon, Attila. Faced with her attack, Aoi Hayanose simply said there was no way something that huge could float in the sky, and in the next second, the golden dragon actually fell. As it turned out, Aoi Hayanose's ability allowed her to change reality based on what she personally believed to be true. However, the ability could still fail, especially against characters with high destiny value, whose reality could not be changed so easily. But the golden dragon still refused to give up and lunged straight at the chubby guy. Just as she was about to attack again, a black monster suddenly appeared and struck Attila. Shockingly, it was the invader, True Rat. Aoi Hayanose recognized the black monster in front of her at a glance. But luckily, at that moment, True Rat had its attention drawn by the giant tower in the distance, so it quickly left the scene. Meanwhile, on the male lead side, everything was still going smoothly, thanks to his endless instant kills. Then a white-haired man holding a staff suddenly appeared before them. The man claimed to be the creator of the tower, and was furious that the puzzles he had racked his brain to design had been cleared by someone cheating. As the tower's creator, the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. So he decided the male lead deserved a little punishment. But before he could even finish showing off, the male lead erased him without giving him a chance to act. The instant the creator died, the entire tower system triggered a red alert. The soul pathways were severed and sealed. The first barrier around the tower was affected, and every trap and mechanism inside shut down at once. What followed was even more unexpected. Inside the tower's arena, 2 challengers were in the middle of a duel. These people all seemed like seasoned experts, so simply ignoring them and walking past probably would not work. Right now, the male lead only wanted to leave the tower. After all, this had nothing to do with them, and getting involved would only bring more trouble. But before they could walk away, someone suddenly stopped them and dragged them into the situation. The man was confused by their sudden arrival, but said they had come at the perfect time, then demanded that the male and female leads team up with the half-demon girl over there. Together, they would face his subordinates in a 3-on-3 duel. Clearly, this guy was a type who was so confident he never listened to anyone. Leaving the rabbit girl aside for now, the other 2 opponents were probably even stronger. At the same time, the man ordered his side to hold back against the half-demon girl and the twin-tailed girl, But as for the male lead, they could ignore his life completely. In other words, killing him was perfectly allowed. This left the half-demon girl completely stunned. After confirming that all of this was caused by the male lead, she immediately bowed to him. Then she made an unreasonable request. The man could never have imagined that the goddess he had struggled so hard to summon would actually be connected to the demon god. He thought that by relying on her status, he could stop the demon god's resurrection. But he never expected her to switch sides less than 2.5 seconds after being summoned. More accurately, they had known each other all along, because the goddess had once made a promise. And that so-called promise was actually with the demon god, the very monster threatening the entire world. Good grief. The man had already prepared himself for terrible luck, but he never imagined it would be so bad that it could drag all of humanity toward extinction. As it turned out just moments earlier, to help the half-demon girl search for her younger sister, the male lead had entered the underground passage beneath the trial tower. The moment they stepped into the dungeon, they noticed something strange. The staircase here felt like an endless loop. There might have been a barrier interfering with space, which meant something incredibly important had to be hidden inside. But right then, a blade-like monster suddenly shattered the barrier in this place. Although they had no idea what kind of creature it was, it ended up saving them some effort. The half-demon girl then found a room up ahead, and what entered their sight was a horrifying experiment room filled with the bodies of her fellow half-demons. They were still too late, but luckily, her younger sister was not among them, which meant she might still be alive. Meanwhile, on the other side, because the tower's creator had been instantly killed by the male lead, the entire first barrier was struggling to hold, and even the second barrier had become unstable. The predicted time for the demon god's followers to break through the barrier had suddenly shortened. Originally, it should have taken about 3 days, but now none of that mattered because the entire tower had already been wrecked by the demon god's followers. With just a casual raise of a hand, they could instantly kill Holy King's knights, and even high-level magic attacks were crushed out with one hand. And now another follower of the demon god had appeared. If even a mere follower could release this much pressure, it was terrifying to imagine what the demon god himself would be like. Seeing that the situation was becoming impossible to handle, Rainier decided to gamble on his own ability and see what powerful item he could pull. This time he used every last gem he had for the summon, believing that even with pity alone, he should be guaranteed the featured character. But the result proved the situation was truly finished, because the goddess had switched sides. Not only did she know the demon god, the two of them even had a teacher-student relationship. As it turned out, Rainier had only been a tool the goddess used to revive the demon god. The reason she gave him a resurrection ability was simply because she had taken a liking to his unlucky fate. How could someone be this ridiculously unfortunate? Now the creator of the trial tower was dead, and even the goddess killer had vanished. If those two were still around, things would have been troublesome for me. The so-called enemy of the world must refer to someone exactly like you. After saying that, she pulled an apple out of thin air. This was the core of the barrier, and if she crushed it, the second barrier would completely disappear. But she never expected that the demon god had actually been accidentally killed by the male lead before he even entered the trial. The whole truth hit everyone so suddenly that they could barely process it. No one could have imagined that the supposedly terrifying demon god had already been wiped out off-screen by the male lead's absurd power. While everyone was still stunned, the half-demon suddenly struck and cut down Sword Saint Bubu, finally avenging her people. At the same time, when the goddess saw that the demon god had fallen, she burst into crazed laughter, while the demon race could not believe what they were seeing. In order to revive their master, they planned to sacrifice the lives of all humanity, and in an instant, every demon began flooding in. Seeing this, the male lead told the two of them to get close to him, because he was about to show off for real. And on the other side, Aoi Hayanose had also brought the chubby guy into the trial. To shut the noisy goddess up, Aoi Hayanose told Rick that he had already become the new sword saint, and all he had to do was stab the woman in front of him with the holy sword in his hand. That would be enough to kill the goddess. After hearing this, Rick immediately did as he was told and stabbed her. At last, things became a little quieter. Next, Aoi Hayanose needed to find out which person was Yogiri Takato, and luckily the chubby guy had seen the male lead before. He recognized him at a glance. Even though they had already found the person, Aoi Hayanose still used appraisal just to be safe. But the moment she checked him, something was clearly wrong. Hearing that she was looking for him, the male lead casually asked if she needed something. Aoi Hayanose instantly changed her tone, saying she had mistaken him for someone else, and that this had nothing to do with her. Before anyone could react, Aoi Hayanose immediately fled the scene, leaving only the chubby guy standing there in complete confusion. After the battle, once Rick learned that the demon god had actually been killed by the male lead, he desperately wanted to know what kind of being Yogiri really was. Meanwhile, news of Aoi Hayanose's failure soon reached the sage Ziwan. To uncover Yogiri Takato's true identity, Ziwan had no choice but to summon a researcher who knew the male lead on the spot, hoping to ask him about Yogiri Takato. But the researcher was stunned the moment he heard that name. If another world truly existed, then that meant the source of that guy's power was there. After checking the tracking system, he discovered that the signal really was coming from that place. Since they had sent him to this world, they had basically become saviors. But right then, a message came through the phone saying the first gate had opened and a chain self-destruction protocol for C-rank staff was being executed. Before the two of them could even react, the man in front of them died as his head exploded. That little kid was simply far too terrifying. At only 2.5 years old, he had already mastered the instant death ability, and with just a single thought, he could kill any existence. That was because he was a conceptual god wearing the appearance of a human. Although he looked harmless on the outside, if he ever felt displeased, he would make sure you learned your lesson in the next life. To imprison such a monster, the Japanese government even built an exclusive underground facility just for him and hired high-paid caretakers to constantly manage his emotions, all to prevent the male lead from coming out and endangering the world. But what no one expected was that this terrifying demon king was actually brought under control by his newly hired caretaker, Asaka Takatu. The male lead not only trusted her unconditionally, even the name Yogiri was given to him by her. However, those peaceful days did not last long. One day, Asaka became overwhelmed by stress and applied for leave. After going a long time without seeing Asaka, the male lead immediately grew restless. He left the underground facility with ease and found a researcher to ask where Asaka had gone. As it turned out, Asaka had been secretly taken away by people from the organization. The other side was a worldwide organization, so their power was not enough to rescue her. After hearing that Asaka had been captured, the male lead quickly arrived at the base of that so-called world organization. At first, the enemy thought the male lead could only kill things he could see, so they believed they just had to take him out before he looked at them. But they had no idea that the male lead could follow killing intent itself and send away anyone who posed a threat to him. After instantly killing his way through the base, the male lead finally found Asaka in its deepest area, and the two returned to the underground facility. Afterwards, seeing everything that had happened left Asaka completely stunned. After all, the casualties this time had been devastating, but the researcher simply said that since this was something Yogiri had done, no one could do anything about it. To prevent a tragedy like this from happening again, the researcher decided to make an exception and promote Asaka from trainee to full-time employee. Just like that, she had somehow landed a permanent iron rice bowl. The scene then returned to the other world where the male lead, the female lead, and Denura's ancestor had finally arrived at the royal capital. The moment they reached the gate, they were surrounded by kingdom soldiers. As it turned out, the other side was in charge of security at the South Central Gate. They had noticed that the vehicle the male lead was driving seemed to belong to the Undead Knight Order. To avoid suspicion, the male lead immediately explained that they were sage candidates chosen by Lady Ziwan and had come here for the trial. If they were truly sage candidates, then they should have blessings, so the guards gave both of them a full inspection. Although they did detect the presence of blessings, that kind of disguise was apparently quite easy to fake. Then they noticed something else. An amulet engraved with a royal crest. Anyone carrying something like that could freely enter and leave the royal capital if they were connected to the royal family. But right then, another person stepped forward to question them. This newcomer was also a member of the royal family. Since they knew Richard, that meant they were supposedly Holy King's knights as well, so he asked whether they could show the holy swords granted to them by the sword saint. Since they could not produce the holy swords he demanded, they proved themselves through a duel instead. If they were truly Holy King's knights, then he wanted to see their swordsmanship. If they could not even defeat him, a mere sword guard, then there was no way they could be Holy King's knights. Realizing the opponent practiced orthodox swordsmanship, the male lead felt this fight might be a little troublesome. But Moko told him not to worry because the motto of the Denura style was simple dirty tricks are invincible. It relied on unexpected movements to deceive the enemy. At that moment, Denura's ancestor had already taken her stance. And although outsiders would think they were just glaring at each other, only those who understood the technique knew she had hidden her left leg from the enemy's sight. The goal was to slowly move forward and shorten the distance while gradually pulling the extended sword backward in the opposite direction to make the opponent misjudge the range. Afterward, to apologize for his earlier behavior, the other side offered to guide the male and female leads personally. But the moment they entered the royal capital, they noticed that most of the people here were fully armed. These people were called explorers warriors, who challenged the demon realm. As it turned out, the demon god was sealed beneath his royal capital, and his followers had been constantly trying to break out. Hearing that there was another demon god left Denura's ancestors shaken. Was the demon god not supposed to be the one in the canyon? However, David was not very clear on that either. And after learning about the situation here, the male lead decided to take part in the trial as well. After saying goodbye to David, they soon arrived at a church. There they finally met their classmates again. But right at that moment, someone who looked extremely cute and harmless stepped forward, interrupted the king's speech, and declared that they were not his subjects. This was the first time the king had ever seen someone face him with that kind of attitude. In the next second, he instantly drew his sword and sliced off 4 of the white-haired girl's fingers, giving everyone present a brutal warning. The male lead never expected that all he did was bring an instant kill cheat into another world, yet the research organization had actually sent 3 people to monitor him. Leaving aside whether that was even useful anymore, what was even more ridiculous was that after classmate Shinozaki learned the male lead had come here without releasing his full power, she immediately performed an eye-gouging stunt on the spot, then calmly walked away afterward. That outrageous move left the male lead completely stunned, as it turned out just moments earlier. When everyone learned that Denora was still alive, the entire class was shocked. Although most of them were staring at the female lead, 3 people had their attention fixed on the male lead. Afterward, they approached him on their own and apologized because the male lead's first gate seal had already opened, and for all they knew, he might kill them to silence them. But the male lead said he had no intention of doing that, and being treated like someone who slaughtered innocents actually annoyed him more. After talking things through, they learned that the blonde girl was Carol, a ninja belonging to the agency. The kneeling woman beside her was Ryoko, a samurai from the Research Institute, and classmate Shinozaki, who had just gouged out her own eyes, belonged to the church. All of them had been sent here to monitor Yogiri Takato. The one who seemed to have awakened as an idol was Akinu Aoi, and the reason was obvious. Chichi had failed to unite the class, so Akinu was chosen to act as the new leader. On top of that, she had placed a contract on every classmate. If anyone used their blessing against a companion, they would violate the contract, and the punishment would be death. Of course, most of this was meant to keep the reckless youth trio from causing trouble. In other words, the class was barely being held together by force. After understanding the class's current situation, the next day they followed the main group to attack the underground demon god seal. Coincidentally, David and Rick also appeared here. As it turned out, the royal family possessed the power of the seal. With that power, low-level monsters could be erased with ease. Meanwhile, the chubby guy had once again been captured by someone and forced to act as a guide. The one who caught him was actually a demon god follower who had narrowly survived. When Luke heard that the male lead could kill with nothing but a thought, he could hardly believe it. If he wanted to kill him now, he would have to summon an existence even more terrifying than the demon god. The key lay beneath the royal capital, where the demon god's younger sister was sealed. Because she was too difficult to control, the demon god sealed her away when she was not paying attention. Luke believed such a being would be enough to defeat the male lead, so he forcibly dragged the chubby guy to the royal capital, even though the chubby guy desperately wanted no part of it. But for now, he could only take things one step at a time. After that, they went to a tavern to gather information, only to unexpectedly run into the supposedly dead Ling Xiang. Without saying a word, she immediately grabbed Ushio, one of the reckless youth trio, and if you asked why, her answer was simple: revenge. In just a short moment, she beat Ushio to death with her bare fists. Then she left a ruthless warning for the other two, making it clear they would not escape either. It seemed the chubby guy might also be one of her targets. But right then another uninvited guest walked into the tavern. The newcomer was none other than the sage Ziwan, and this one was an even bigger problem. Clearly she had come looking for the chubby guy. The reason was obvious. She also wanted to ask him about the male lead. Meanwhile, on the other side, the male lead had already learned about the death of Ushio from the reckless youth trio. According to the two who returned, the culprit seemed to be their classmate, Ling Xiang. She had even claimed that for the sake of revenge, she would kill every last one of them. This boss never imagined that one day, his own helicopter would suddenly crash out of nowhere. Just as he landed and tried to figure out who had caused it, he was scared senseless in the very next second, because the man standing in front of him was none other than the male lead with the instant kill cheat. The man had originally thought he could assassinate him easily through remote surveillance, but he never expected the male lead to track him down through the connection itself. By the time he realized the target had discovered him, it was already too late, and all of his trump cards had been exhausted. With no other choice, the man summoned a death god to take him away. But this time, even the king of the underworld could not save him. As it turned out, just 2.5 minutes earlier, the male lead and Denura's ancestor were strolling through the kingdom streets when he suddenly realized someone was watching him. Sure enough, on top of a building not far away, a sniper was aiming a cannon straight at the male lead. But before the sniper could even fire, the male lead's ability automatically killed him. And after learning that targeting the male lead would not work, the enemy turned the muzzle toward Denura's ancestor instead. After catching the assassin, The male lead originally planned to spare him for the sake of being classmates. But after seeing the female replica lying on the ground, the male lead suddenly changed his mind. Because that replica was actually a doll modeled after the male lead's childhood friend. He never expected they would go this far just to take his life. Meanwhile, Ling Xiang was also continuing her revenge against their classmates. Although her opponent was the strongest martial artist in the class, in Ling Xiang's eyes, after awakening the system, he was still not enough. And with a single strike, she cut off Black Belt's arm. Looking at it now, the other students' abilities were nothing special either. But Black Belt said that if it were not for the seal, there was no way he would have been defeated so easily. As it turned out, as long as sage candidates stayed in the royal capital, their blessings would be forcibly suppressed by the royal family's skill. Ling Xiang was very straightforward, and the moment she heard this, she immediately headed to the palace, planning to assassinate the king. The king really had it rough. He was merely sleeping at home, yet someone had come to kill him. So he immediately moved with lightning speed, charged straight at Ling Xiang. The sudden attack caught her off guard, but if that was all he had, it was nowhere near enough to hurt her. After figuring out the king's abilities, Ling Xiang no longer planned to play around. In the next second, she summoned a dragon tail out of thin air and wrapped it around Black Belt. Meanwhile, the chubby guy and the demon god follower finally found the demon god's younger sister Mana. But at this point, Luke already knew he did not have long to live, because not only had he failed to protect the demon god, he had even let him die without understanding how. Just when it seemed disaster was unavoidable, Mana unexpectedly accepted her brother's death calmly, but revenge was still necessary. Before that, however, there was one thing she had to do. She needed to give birth to her brother. The moment she finished speaking, Luke's hands disappeared because they contained the demon god's factor and could serve as the seed for her brother's rebirth. Seeing this, the chubby guy panicked and desperately begged Mana to spare Luke. Unexpectedly, Mana actually agreed to the chubby guy's plea. However, if they wanted Luke spared, they had to place the key on the platform and undo her brother's seal. On the other side, the male lead's class also held an emergency secret meeting. At the moment, only 18 of them remained, and Ling Xiang alone had already killed 8. The moment this was said, panic instantly spread through the others. She was only one person, yet she had already managed to kill them one after another. Clearly, she was waiting until their combat members went to attack the Demon King, then striking while they were vulnerable. Before anyone realized it, the reckless youth trio had already been completely wiped out. Now, the kingdom had ordered them to leave because if these walking disasters were not sent away soon, the kingdom itself might be destroyed. So Akanu believed they should focus on completing the Demon King's subjugation as quickly as possible. At the same time, the royal family also sent David to supervise them. Luckily, the monsters on the underground 6th floor were fairly easy to handle, so the subjugation was going surprisingly smoothly. The only thing they truly needed to watch out for was the Demon King's younger sister, who was said to be even stronger than the Demon King himself. But speaking of that, did anyone know where Yogiri Takato had gone? What the female lead never expected was that, right after she left, the sage Ziwan suddenly appeared at the celebration banquet. Ziwan felt that the current Demon King's subjugation trial was far too easy, and at this rate, it would never produce a proper sage. So she decided the difficulty of the trial needed to be raised. This man had the power to instantly kill anything, whether it was a living creature or something that should not even exist. As long as it threatened the male lead's life, its ending was always the same death. Yet even against someone this terrifying, his classmates still wanted to kill him, just like the man before him who possessed the Chronicle of Ages. His ability allowed him to know the course of the future in advance and even rewrite it, but for some unknown reason, that power failed today. No matter how many times he changed the words in the book, the ending remained the same. He was destined to die. And the reason the male lead's classmates wanted to kill him was because of the sage Ziwan. Ziwan had suddenly changed the rules of the game. If the candidates wanted to become sages, they now had to fight a battle royale against every classmate. Only the final survivor would be allowed to become a sage. Obviously, such a demand was completely unreasonable, and the long-haired man tried to step forward and resist. But his death god skill was useless against Ziwan. More accurately, it was not useless. She just kept reviving again and again. To make an example out of him, Ziwan killed the long-haired man on the spot. And with that, the 18-person battle royale officially began. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, the demon god's younger sister Mana had finally broken free from her seal. According to their agreement, she was supposed to spare the chubby guy and Luke. But just as the two were about to leave, the chubby guy suddenly felt something sticky under his feet. As it turned out, Mana had already entered birthing mode, and this place was now inside her body. If they did not escape quickly, they would be turned into nutrients for the birth. Although the chubby guy wanted to take Luke with him, Luke had clearly already made his choice. After kicking the chubby guy away, Luke himself was completely swallowed by Mana. Meanwhile, the male lead who had fallen into the demon realm was also worrying about how to get out. But right then, he suddenly noticed someone up ahead being chased by an unknown liquid. After figuring out the current situation, the two reached an agreement the chubby guy would lead the male lead out of this place, and in return, the male lead would guarantee his safety. On the surface, the battle royale had also reached its most intense stage as time passed. Nearly 80% of the students had been hiding their true strength, just like the white-haired girl in front of them. She looked like she had awakened as a saint, but behind that image, she possessed the power to nullify attacks and fire lasers. No wonder she was so confident. She instantly teleported to the chubby guy's side, and the moment they met, she attacked without a word. Luckily, the male lead interrupted her attack in time, but this time, he did not use his instant kill cheat. Instead, he used Denura's elbow strike. When the chubby guy questioned him, the male lead's reason was simple. He had not sensed any killing intent from her. Although it looked like he had not killed the white-haired girl, his ability had silently killed her power itself. Meanwhile, Denura's ancestor was also secretly waiting for the right chance to move. But at that moment, Moko Moko suddenly sensed someone releasing spirits nearby, and they were even interfering with her connection to the male lead. Clearly, the enemy had already discovered the female lead's location. Just as she was about to leave, a swarm of possessed spirits suddenly appeared in front of her. In an instant, the enemy created a substitute of the female lead. That substitute became her perfect double, and it could even use the Denura family's self-defense techniques. At the same time, after losing Moko Moko's power, the female lead's equipment was forcibly removed under the enemy's command. Just when the situation became critical, the male lead happened to arrive at the scene. Meanwhile, on another side of the battlefield, the fight between Akinu and Shiki was about to begin. Although Shichi wanted to recruit her so they could resist Ziwan together, Akinu rejected him without even thinking, because in her eyes, only the weak huddled together for warmth. And besides, defeating Ziwan was completely impossible. The death god from earlier was the perfect example. After Akino finished dealing with Shichi, she was suddenly wrapped up by an unknown liquid in the very next second, and the other classmates were not spared either. Fear spread instantly. Meanwhile, the battle between Lingxiang and Kakizaki had already reached its conclusion. At the brink of life and death, Kakizaki went so far as to summon a nuclear bomb, preparing to take Lingxiang down with him. At the same time, the male lead had regrouped with the classmates who had no intention of killing him, but before they could even understand the situation, he suddenly felt an overwhelming power closing in. The woman then realized, by chance, that her legs had suddenly stopped obeying her because the male lead had already killed both of her feet. She was supposed to be the strongest sage, yet now she was being completely controlled by the man in front of her. The sage tried to resist, but every attack she attempted to release was instantly killed by the male lead before it could activate. He warned her not to try anything clever, because the moment she directed killing intent at him, his instant kill cheat would automatically erase the threat. Seeing this, the sage hurriedly used teleportation magic. If she could not beat him, she could at least run right. But she never imagined that even after leaving the male lead's line of sight, his instant kill cheat would still work. No matter how many times she regenerated her limbs, they remained completely useless. Only then did she realize the male lead had not been bluffing at all. Left with no choice, she called over her subordinates. But before they could even get close for 2.5 seconds, they were affected the same way their limbs racked with pain nonstop. Realizing how serious the situation was, she had no choice but to return to the male lead and beg him to spare her life. But who could have expected that this entire mess was something she had caused herself? If you had not summoned me, none of this would have happened. Helpless, the sage finally handed over the coordinates of their original world. Although they now knew the coordinates, they still lacked the energy needed to return. So since she had already helped this far, the sage took out her sage knowledge and told the male lead it contained powerful energy. Even so, it still was not enough to send them back. They would need to gather a few more pieces first. And only then did the male lead suddenly remember that he had killed quite a few sages along the way. Did those people also have sage stones on them? It seemed he would have to collect them from other sages. After getting all the information he needed, the male lead kept his promise and spared her. Once everyone had gone far away, Ziwan finally let out a breath of relief. But just as she was about to get up and leave, a puddle of unknown liquid suddenly appeared on the ground. Before she could dodge, she was immediately bound in place. The one who had arrived was none other than the demon god's younger sister, Mana. Seeing this, Ziwan tried to cut off her own legs to break free, but she never expected that all of her skills had already been nullified by Mana. Realizing she had no moves left, Ziwan simply decided to drag Mana down with her. But even that desperate final attempt was completely useless. Meanwhile, atop a certain tower, a believer was celebrating the demon god's revival, while Mana's liquid had already spread throughout the entire royal capital. But right then, a voice suddenly came from behind him, and before he could even react, The male lead instantly killed him. With that, the source of the chaos was erased before it could make another move. Only then did everyone realize that Mana had countless brothers. At that moment, they finally noticed the outside had already been completely surrounded by Mana, and even the protective barrier set up by the royal family had been smashed apart by her. The chubby guy sat collapsed on the ground with a guilty look all over his face. As it turned out, this was the demon god from the deepest part of the demon realm, and the one who revived her was none other than the chubby guy. The moment the words fell, Mana followed the scent and found everyone's location. This time she had officially come for Yogiri Takatu, the one who killed her brother. You have to admit, the chubby guy knew exactly how to read the room. The second he found out she was looking for the male lead, he immediately sold out his teammate. He desperately explained that none of this had anything to do with him and begged not to be dragged into the mess. As long as Mana wanted Yogiri, he was more than willing to point her in the right direction. Although they had eliminated the demon god for now, the liquid she produced did not disappear with her. Because of that, the male lead's group had no way to leave the royal capital. But right then, David said there was still one way out. Everyone climbed to the top of the tower, only to discover there was actually something like an aircraft there. Unfortunately, it could only carry 5 people, so it looked like the chubby guy would have to be sacrificed alone. But luckily, Moko said she had a solution. The other 4 had no choice but to leave first, while the female lead wondered what kind of method Moko had in mind. Moko explained that she had been researching this for a long time, and then a strange transformation began happening to the female lead's body. In the next second, she actually turned into a superhero-like form. The moment the male lead learned he could fly by holding on to her, he hugged her without the slightest hesitation. Never had there been such a perfectly legitimate excuse for physical contact. If she had known it would be like this, she would have left Carol and Ryoko behind instead, because this flying method was far too embarrassing. After the male and female leads reunited with the others, they learned that the chubby guy had run away the moment he landed. But that was fine. After all, they had no obligation to bring him back to Earth with them. Just as everyone was discussing what to do next, a carriage suddenly stopped beside them, and the one who stepped out was Risley, the girl, revived by the vampire Lane. Without wasting a word, she immediately proposed to the male lead. Naturally, there was no way he dared to accept something like that. After all, it was way too sudden. Even though she had been rejected, Risley still handed the sage stone to the male lead and asked him to at least listen to her wish. Meanwhile, somewhere in a forest, the chubby guy was still desperately running. He was terrified that the male lead would find him again, but more than fear, what he felt was excitement, because at long last, he could finally start building his harem in another world.